And yes, indeed, our expert is here to tell us some more. But first off, let's acknowledge our sponsors, Lipton Tea, inspiration flowing from nature, and Baltic natural mineral water. Now, this morning I have Dr. Sumini Yeboah. He's an endocrinologist from the Yeboah Hospital. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
And welcome back to NewDay. It's been a while since you've been here.
Yes. Yes, I'm glad I'm back.
Good. We're also glad you're back as well. Tell us, how common is diabetes? Let's concentrate on Ghana. How common is the diabetes in Ghana?
Very common. Estimate it's around 2-point-something million in the country.
Wow.
So it's very, very, very common. Worldwide, we're talking 300 and something million, but in Ghana, around 2.2 or so.
Okay. What are the various types of diabetes that are out there?
So you can divide them in two main groups, type 1, type 2, and of course there are others, secondary and gestational, but type 1, about 5% of the population would have that, or 5% of the diabetic population would have that.
Okay.
And typically it involves younger people before the age of 30 mostly, although it could be higher. You can have it from age 1 or 0 all the way to that time.
Okay.
The majority have type 2 diabetes, and those what we call the adult onset affects about 95 or 90% of the population. And these tend to be adult, usually overweight or obese, plus or minus family history.
Okay. What's the difference between hypoglycemic and hyperglycemic diabetes?
Okay, so if you have diabetes, your blood sugar levels are high, and that is hyperglycemia. And of course, hypoglycemia is more of a complication of treatment. So if you have hypoglycemia, you don't necessarily have diabetes. But during treatment of diabetes, when for some reason your blood sugar goes too low, then you become hypoglycemic. So you can have it either with medications. Some of the medicines will drop your sugar too much.
Right.
And then if you take insulin, sometimes you can also drop your sugar too much.
Okay.
And then you have hypoglycemia. And you can go into coma from that as well. And this sort of like illustrates the importance of monitoring your treatment while you have diabetes.
Okay. Who is susceptible to diabetes? Is it everyone, or is there just a certain amount of people?
So we can divide them into several groups, but generally, if you have family history,
okay,
then your chances of diabetes is much, much higher. But recently, it's been shown that as the population is increasing in size, then the risk of diabetes also increases.
Now, when you say size, I mean, is that the population growth or the individual body size of people?
Because body size,
right,
being more obese.
Right, exactly.
So that, and therefore that would put everybody at risk, because the whole population, more availability of food is much cheaper than before, and therefore we're putting on more weight. And there's been a direct relationship between increased weight as well as the risk of getting diabetes.
Okay.
Also, the population is changing. We are becoming more affluent. There's as somebody put it, we eat from birth to death. At Adorins, we have meals to eat, weddings, engagements, funerals. It's all about food. So we taking in much more food than before. The food also is richer, so it has more fat. And therefore people are likely to gain more weight with that. And then in addition to that, we are driving more, we are not exercising like before, so decreased activity. And all these factors is making the whole population at risk.
Okay. We were discussing earlier on in the introduction of the show, when we were talking to Bridget about there being a relation between pregnancy and diabetes. What is that relationship?
So during pregnancy, you can have what we call gestational diabetes. Not everybody has it, but people who are at risk, family history, overweight, older people who are having, who become pregnant, all have increased risk of gestational diabetes. And because of the hormonal interference, or the hormones, it also increases your risk of diabetes. And sometime during the mid-trimester, during mid-pregnancy, then your blood sugar levels can increase, and that is termed gestational diabetes.
Okay.
Not everybody would have persistent diabetes after that. In most cases, the blood sugar levels will resolve after pregnancy.
Okay.
But those people who have that will have a higher risk of getting diabetes
Later
down the
on.
line.
Okay,
Yes.
understandable. All right. Now, the main thinking behind diabetes, or even the way people describe it, even in vernacular, is sugar disease. Is there's people think there is a direct link with sugar consumption and diabetes. How truthful is that, and what is the link between the two?
So, in terms of eating sugar in itself and getting diabetes, if your pancreas is working well, then that shouldn't happen.
Okay.
However, quote unquote, sugar in terms of the food, rice, cake, the minerals, drinks, sweet things. So all those things would increase your weight over time.
Right.
And that would also increase your risk of diabetes. And
Okay.
if there's a family history and all other risk factors, then that risk also goes
Okay,
higher.
so the sugar indeed would lead to something else that could lead to diabetes.
That's diabetes, exactly.
Okay, all right then. Now, how do we reduce our risk? Because that's the main thing. Today is International Diabetes Day. We want to ensure that we are managing diabetes as well as possible, and obviously bringing down the risk factors. So what do we do?
Okay, so we did mention some of the risk factors. That the one key thing is weight. Maintaining your weight and losing weight if you are overweight.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you can do that, then your risk will decrease. There has been studies where people had high risk of diabetes, people with family histories, people with impaired glucose tolerance or slightly high sugar levels. They were randomized to exercise, diet, and then not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And those who did a diet and lost weight decrease the risk of having diabetes over time.
Right.
Also, those who exercise would also decrease their risk. So the key thing is our diet. If we can change our diet, we tend to have more of a decreased caloric intake, low food intake. Mm-hmm. If you are overweight, you lose weight. You decrease sweet food, cakes, etc., etc.
Yeah.
All those things boils to the total calorie content in a day.
Right.
And if that is maintained, then that would also decrease your weight and also decrease your risk. In addition to that, increased activity, exercise. If you can exercise, regular exercise, increasing your activity, burning energy, and that would also decrease your risk of diabetes down the line.
And like you said, we're using our cars quite a lot as well. So maybe once in a while, if it's just down the road, leave the car at home, take a walk.
And walk. Or, when you come back from work, you just do a 30 minutes walk in the neighborhood. You don't necessarily need to run or jog or move your arms, but just burn some extra calories. And usually we'll say 30 minutes a day walk in addition to your daily work at work. Mm-hmm. So some will say, I just worked so much in the day at work, so I don't want to do that. But I think there's an extra amount which is helpful.
Okay. Now, what's the treatment like for diabetes?
It depends on which type that you have, whether you have type 1, type 2. If you have type 2, one key thing, we always talk about diet, exercise being a cornerstone of the type of food. Because even when you take medications and you eat too much caloric intake, then your sugar is going to go high. So diet, important diet, exercise. If you're overweight, diet to lose weight. Mm-hmm. You need to add more fruits and vegetables into your diet. Get a dietitian to go over your diet and the type of things you need. And of course, we mentioned exercise as well. Mm-hmm. And then medications. If it's type 2, we can start with oral medications or pills. These days, depending on your levels, we can have 1, 2, or 3 pills as needed, plus or minus insulin. One key thing is, or one key question is, why do we treat diabetes? The key issue is that we want to treat you to prevent complications.
Right.
So that initially you might be urinating a lot. When you start treatment, all those symptoms might improve. But if your blood sugar levels is not within the normal range, then you have a risk of complications.
Right.
And therefore, you need to monitor it and bring those numbers into the normal range.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now obviously you run a hospital in East Legon. Are you finding that there are people reporting or coming to your hospital and being diagnosed with diabetes are increasing at all?
Overall, yes. Yes, I would say the incidence of diabetes in the country is rising because of the factors we mentioned earlier on. More affluent, the diet, eating what we call the posh food.
Luxury goods.
Luxury stuff, right? And which are mainly refined products, they are refined carbohydrates and so on. We need to be going back to the old-time fresh foods and contumely and things like that. But yeah, definitely it's increasing.
And in regards to treatment, is it expensive?
It can be, but overall, you could also have a good treatment which is not expensive. There are medications available that you can use, exercise. For instance, if you are overweight and then you make a conscious effort to lose weight, then the medicines that we give will be able to work very effectively.
Right.
However, if your weight is high and you're still eating more food, then you might need 2, 3 or more medications, plus or minus insulin. Whereas if you lost weight, you watch your diet, you might just be on one medicine and that should be all.
Okay. So is it one of those things whereby if you detect it early, you can manage it well and bring down the cost of treatment going forward, as to waiting till last minute when you're going into shock and then having to go through the full-blown treatment?
Definitely yes. This issue, there are 2 issues. One is the acute and the chronic, so that if you're managing your diabetes well, you take your medicines regularly, you exercise, you go for regular checkup, and it's in the good range. Even though you think that you're spending money for that, that is way less than if you don't treat it well, and then you get into an acute situation where you go into a coma, for instance, and then you need IV insulin, you need infusions, etc., and the cost really just shoots very, very high. So I think maintaining blood sugar in a normal range, going for regular checkup is very, very useful. Now, in the second issue is the chronic problems. If your sugar levels are not well controlled, then you can have chronic complications. And I use this to illustrate. For instance, let's say you take, this is a very, very, very basic illustration, 2 cups of water. One has pure water and the other has water with sugar in it. And you put your left eyeball in one and your right eyeball in the other with sugar. And you leave them there for 5 years. Which of them is going to get damaged?
Yeah.
Obviously, the eyeball in the sugar water is going to get damaged. And that's exactly what happens. So if the sugar is high and it's untreated, then you're going to damage your eye because the sugar is running around your eyes all the time. You're going to damage your kidneys. You're going to get damage your feet, the vessels there get amputations. And at that time, the cost goes way high because you have to amputate your leg, you have to go on kidney dialysis for the rest of your life, you get a heart attack or you have a stroke, and so on and so forth.
I think we've scared them enough, Doc. All right, so today marks International Diabetes Day. Please remember that, and please go and get your regular checkups. And thank you once again, Dr. Asumani Yeboah, for coming in and educating us more about diabetes. This has been Dr. Asumani Yeboah he's an endocrinologist from the Yeboah Hospital in East Lake, Gone. And this has been our Health Club, brought to you by Lipton Tea and Voltic Natural Mineral Water.